Are you tired of those diets? The ones that make huge promises and then, well, let's just say underdeliver.
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
Right. It's like a constant up and down restriction, and then those cravings hit you.
It's exhausting.
Have you ever wished there was a way to enjoy, like really enjoy your favorite foods without that guilt?
Oh, absolutely. Food should be enjoyable, not a source of stress.
Exactly. What if, while you're working on your health, you could unlock this sharper focus, have more energy? Many people are asking this very question, especially with all the challenges of just staying healthy.
It's a huge concern these days. Finding something that actually works long term, that's the real challenge.
Welcome to the deep dive. We're going deep on something you've been asking about, a
Mm.
topic that's everywhere, intermittent fasting.
It's fascinating, really.
It is, and you've sent in a ton of material on this, so we're gonna explore this, all of it, just for you.
Unlike those fad diets, intermittent fasting, it seems to work with our biology, not against it.
For sure. It's not just about what you eat, but when you eat.
That timing aspect, it's a game changer.
It really is. Now, before we dive into all of this, a huge thank you to London Heartbeats Academy UK. Their support means a lot. They've got like over 150 courses on all sorts of topics.
That's impressive.
So go check them out. And if you want more great conversations like this one, stay informed. Subscribe to their social media, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all free updates regularly.
Don't miss out.
Right. Okay, so this deep dive, our mission today, it's all about intermittent fasting. We're going to define it, break it down. Why is it so popular? The benefits, all those different methods, safety, and we'll give you a crystal clear guide on how to start, to actually do this, all without, overwhelming you.
Exactly. No information overload here, just clear, concise, and actionable insights.
So let's start with something that popped up a lot in what you sent us.
Hmm.
This frustration with traditional dieting, the struggle.
Yeah, it's a big issue. Your sources clearly show obesity is a growing problem globally.
And people want solutions.
Right, but these traditional diets, the
Yeah.
ones focused on cutting calories, they often fail, especially long term.
It's so hard to stick with them.
It is. It's like you're on this constant uphill battle. You cut back drastically, and you might see some progress initially, but then keeping it up, that's where it gets tough.
It's unsustainable for most people.
Right. And that's where you get into this yo-yo dieting. Lose weight, gain it back. Lose weight, gain it back. It's a never-ending cycle.
Ugh, the yo-yo effect. So frustrating.
And it's not just about the number on the scale either. It takes a mental toll too.
Absolutely. It messes with your mind, your relationship with food.
Exactly. The sources really emphasize that. It can be incredibly discouraging. And there's even research suggesting that yo-yo dieting for some, it might actually lead to even more weight gain in the long run.
So it's not just the disappointment of not keeping the weight off. It could backfire and make things even harder in the future. So is there another way?
That's the big question. And this is where intermittent fasting comes in. It's a way of eating. It's a pattern, really, that cycles between eating and not eating. And this is key. It's different from what you eat.
So instead of obsessing over every calorie, every single gram of fat, you're focusing on when you eat.
Precisely. Traditional diets, they put these strict limits on what you can eat, right? Certain foods are off limits, calorie counting, it becomes all-consuming.
And you're constantly thinking about the foods you can't have.
Yes. And while, you might lose weight initially, that feeling of deprivation, it's hard to sustain. People end up, going back to their old habits.
Yeah, you can only tell yourself no so many times.
Right. And this is where intermittent fasting offers a different approach. It's less about rules and restrictions and more about timing.
So it's like a schedule rather than a list of banned foods.
Exactly. And this can be really freeing, It gives people a sense of control, flexibility, and the sources suggest that this makes it easier to stick with in the long run.
That makes a lot of sense. If you're not constantly denying yourself, you're less likely to rebel against the whole thing.
And importantly, it still delivers results.
It helps with weight loss.
Yes, but it's not just about that. There are other benefits too.
Okay, this is interesting. So more than just shedding pounds.
Absolutely. Your sources highlight that people who practice intermittent fasting report feeling better overall, more energy, sharper focus, even increased productivity.
Well, those are some pretty big claims. I mean, who wouldn't want more energy and focus, especially in today's world, right?
Right. And the benefits don't stop there. improved blood sugar control, a stronger immune system, better brain function, reduced inflammation. Your sources even talk about cellular repair.
Hold on. Improved blood sugar, immunity boost, sharper brain, less inflammation, and the body actually repairing itself at the cellular level. It sounds too good to be true.
Well, research is still ongoing, but these are the potential benefits highlighted in the materials you provided. We'll get into the science behind all this, how it actually works.
Definitely need to explore that. Okay, so we know what it is, why it's gaining popularity. But one thing that struck me in the research is that intermittent fasting isn't, this brand new thing.
Oh, absolutely not. This isn't some fad diet that just appeared out of nowhere. The concept of fasting, it's been around for centuries.
Yeah, I remember seeing mentions of fasting in religious practices.
Exactly. Your materials talk about fasting in the Bible, the Quran, and of course
Right.
Ramadan for Muslims. So restricting food intake for a specific period, it's been part of religious practices for a very long time.
So it's not just a trendy diet.
Right. And it goes beyond religion, too.
Yeah.
Even the ancient Greeks practiced fasting. And many indigenous cultures incorporated it into rituals and ceremonies. So clearly, fasting has held different meanings throughout history.
Fascinating. So it wasn't always about weight loss or health like we often think of it today.
Exactly. There are even instances of fasting being used as a form of political protest, like the suffragettes. They used hunger strikes to fight for their rights.
Wow, powerful statement.
It is. And then shifting to health specifically, your materials mentioned therapeutic fasting in the 1800s. It was used to treat various conditions, hypertension, headaches, all sorts of things.
So it was like a medical treatment back then.
Yes, and it was usually supervised by doctors.
Each
And the duration of the fast, well, it varied a lot, from just a day to even months in some cases.
months. That's a long time to go without food.
Yeah.
So what happened? Why did therapeutic fasting become less common?
Well, as pharmaceutical drugs became more widespread, the popularity of fasting declined.
Makes sense.
But now it's back. Intermittent fasting has seen this huge resurgence. It was even one of the most searched health terms online a few years ago.
Like a comeback story. So let's get into the different ways people are doing intermittent fasting today.
Sure. The basic idea, as your sources highlight, is to restrict your food intake for a set amount of time. But specific details, those can vary a lot.
Okay, let's start with what seems to be the most popular, like the entry-level intermittent fasting, the 16.8 method.
Right, 16.8. You eat for an 8-hour window and then you fast for 16.
16 hours. That
Right.
sounds pretty intense for someone just starting out.
Well, the good news is you're probably already fasting for a good chunk of that time. Most of it happens while you're asleep.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So you might skip breakfast, have your first meal at noon, and then your last meal by 8 p.m. Or you could have breakfast and lunch within that 8-hour window and skip dinner. It's flexible.
So you're basically just extending that overnight fast a bit.
Huh.
Makes sense. Okay, what about the 24-hour fast or the eat, stop, eat method?
Yeah, that one's a bit more challenging. You eat normally for a day, and then you completely abstain from food for the next 24 hours.
That's a full day of no food at all.
It is. But you typically don't do this every day, maybe once or twice a week, non-consecutively. So you have normal eating days in between the fasts.
Okay, that sounds more doable. And there's also the 5.2 approach.
Yes. 5 days of the week, you eat normally. And then for 2 non-consecutive days, you restrict your calories to like 500 or 600.
So normal eating most of the time and then 2 mini fasts each week.
Exactly. And then there's the warrior diet or the 20.4 method. That one's a bit more intense.
Okay, how does that one work?
You have a 4-hour eating window, usually in the evening, and you consume your entire day's worth of food during those 4 hours. Then you fast for the remaining 20.
Whoa, a 4-hour eating window. That's hardcore. And you mentioned there are even more types of fasting.
Yeah, briefly. Your sources talk about extended fasts like 36 hours, 48 hours, or even longer.
So the fasting world is a diverse place. But the key takeaway here is that there's no, like, one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. It's all about finding what works for you, your lifestyle, your preferences, your goals.
Now, we talked about why intermittent fasting is becoming so popular,
Yeah.
but there's this one key difference between IF and traditional diets that really stood out.
You mean the flexibility?
Yeah. With most diets, there's this long list of forbidden foods, right?
Yeah.
But with intermittent fasting, you can often still enjoy those treats, those things you crave.
Exactly. You're not constantly fighting those urges. You can go out to eat, you can have a social life, and you don't have to be constantly counting calories or worrying about breaking the rules.
And that makes it's psychologically easier to stick with.
Absolutely. Plus, as we discussed earlier, there's the added bonus of all those other benefits, like, more energy, better focus.
Yeah, that definitely sweetens the deal.
It does.
Okay, so we've established what it is and why it's so appealing. Now, let's really dig into the benefits.
All right, let's do it.
And your research, it's packed with them. There's a whole laundry list of potential benefits associated with intermittent fasting. One of the most talked about, and probably why a lot of people start IF in the first place, is weight loss.
Definitely. And your sources, they point to a lot of evidence that supports this. Intermittent fasting can be an effective way to shed those unwanted pounds.
And it could potentially be even more efficient than some of those traditional calorie restriction diets.
Right. And there are a few reasons for this. First, IF seems to boost your metabolism, so you burn fat faster.
Makes sense.
Second, it naturally leads to eating less overall. You have a shorter window to eat, so you tend to consume fewer calories.
So faster fat burning and less calorie intake. Sounds like a winning combination.
It does. And then there's the hormonal changes that happen during fasting.
Right, we touched on that earlier.
Yeah, these changes, they actually help your body utilize fat for fuel more efficiently.
So it's not just about eating less, it's about changing how your body processes energy.
Exactly. And your sources highlight a few key hormones involved in this. Insulin, for one. During fasting, insulin levels drop significantly.
And why is that important?
Well, insulin is a hormone that tells your body to store fat. When insulin levels are low, it's easier for your body to burn fat instead of storing it.
Okay, so lower insulin equals more fat burning.
Right. And then there's human growth hormone, or HGH. Fasting can cause a spike in HGH levels.
I've heard that HGH is good for muscle building.
It is, and it also helps with fat loss. And then there's norepinephrine, or noradrenaline. It signals your fat cells to release stored fat into the bloodstream for energy.
So basically during fasting, your body becomes a fat burning machine.
Pretty much. And there's this misconception that fasting slows down your metabolism, which is totally not true.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Like your body goes into starvation mode and starts conserving energy.
Right, but the research in your materials, it actually suggests the opposite. Short-term fasting can actually increase your metabolic rate, sometimes by as much as 14%.
Really? That's fascinating. So it actually revs things up.
It can, yeah. And this leads to even more efficient fat burning.
Yeah.
So yeah, that whole starvation mode myth is just that, a myth.
Okay, good to know. And speaking of myths, the materials also mention the fear of muscle loss when you're trying to lose weight.
Right.
But intermittent fasting, you might have an advantage here too.
You might.
It seems to help preserve muscle mass better than some traditional diets.
Exactly.
And maintaining muscle, it's not just about looking toned. It's crucial for your overall health, your metabolism, your strength, everything.
Absolutely. And speaking of overall health, the next benefit, it's pretty fascinating. Autophagy.
Autophagy.
Ah.
That word keeps popping up everywhere.
It does, and for good reason. It's basically your body's way of cleaning up shop at a cellular level.
So like cellular spring cleaning.
Exactly. When you fast, your cells start getting rid of waste, damaged components. It's like a recycling and repair system.
That's pretty cool.
And there's evidence suggesting that autophagy can actually protect against diseases like Alzheimer's and even cancer.
Whoa. So intermittent fasting could potentially help prevent those serious diseases.
Potentially, yeah. The research is still ongoing, but it's a really promising area. And some experts believe that this process of cellular repair could lead to a longer, healthier lifespan.
Okay, that's a big deal. So what else? What other benefits does the research highlight?
Well, there's improved insulin sensitivity.
Right, and this is particularly important for people with type 2 diabetes or those at risk of developing it.
Exactly. When your body is resistant to insulin, it means your cells aren't responding to insulin properly, and that leads to high blood sugar.
And high blood sugar, that's not good.
Not good at all. But intermittent fasting has been shown to reduce insulin resistance, making your cells more sensitive to insulin. This can lower your blood sugar levels and potentially even prevent or manage type 2 diabetes.
Really? That's amazing. So it's not just a weight loss tool. It could actually be like a preventive measure or even a treatment for diabetes.
Potentially, yeah. And there's even research on rats with diabetes showing that intermittent fasting protected against kidney damage, which is a serious complication of the disease.
Okay, but I have to emphasize, especially for people with diabetes or any other health condition, it's crucial to talk to your doctor before making any major changes to your diet.
Absolutely.
Okay, so weight loss, autophagy, insulin sensitivity, and there's more, right?
Yes, your sources also talk about enhanced brain function.
Like becoming like super smart from fasting.
Well, not exactly super smart, but there is a clear connection between your overall health and your brain health.
Okay, that makes sense.
And intermittent fasting, it influences several factors that are crucial for brain health.
Like what?
Well, we've already talked about how IF reduces oxidative stress and inflammation
Uh,
and how it helps regulate blood sugar and insulin.
right.
Those things are all good for your brain.
Okay, so it's creating a healthier environment for your brain to function.
Exactly. Plus, there are studies on rats that show that IF can stimulate the growth of new brain cells.
New brain cells, so I can actually get smarter.
Well, it's more about improving cognitive function, things like learning and memory. And IF has also been shown to increase levels of a protein called BDNF. It's essential for brain cell growth and survival.
So it's like fertilizer for your brain.
In a way, yeah. And low levels of this BDNF, they've been linked to brain problems and depression. So increasing it through fasting, that's a good thing.
So IF could potentially improve mood and protect against cognitive decline.
Potentially, yeah. And there's even some research on animals suggesting that it might help protect the brain from stroke damage.
Wow. That's a lot of potential benefits for your brain.
It is. And finally, the last benefit discussed in your sources, it's reduced inflammation.
Inflammation. It's not like when you sprain your ankle and it swells up.
That's acute inflammation, but there's also this thing called chronic inflammation, and that's when the inflammatory response is kind of always switched on, and that can damage your body over time.
Like a constant low-grade fire in your body.
Exactly. And it's linked to so many
Yep.
diseases, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, you name it.
So reducing inflammation, that's a big deal.
It is. And intermittent fasting, well, the research shows that it can help fight inflammation.
Mhm.
It can actually help your body fight off that low-grade fire.
Wow. So intermittent fasting, it's not just about weight loss. It's like a whole body health upgrade.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so we've covered the what and the why of IF, but let's break down exactly how it helps with weight loss. Your sources mention three main reasons.
Okay, let's get into the specifics. The first one, and this might seem pretty obvious, is that you just eat less overall.
So you're simply consuming fewer calories.
Right. When you restrict your eating window, you naturally end up skipping meals, and that automatically reduces your calorie intake. It's simple math.
But you did mention that some people might not lose weight if they overeat during their eating window.
Yes, that's an important point. If you stuff yourself during those eating hours, then you're not really creating a calorie deficit.
So it's not a free pass to eat whatever you want whenever you want within that window.
No, but for a lot of people, just having that structure, that time restriction, it helps them eat less naturally without having to count every calorie.
Okay, so the key is to be mindful even during your eating window.
Exactly. Now, the second reason, it's a little more complex. It has to do with hormones.
Right, those hormonal shifts we talked about.
Yeah. Yes. When you fast, your body goes through a series of changes that actually make it better at burning fat for energy.
It's like flipping a switch in your body.
It is. And a few key hormones play a role here. Insulin, for one. Its levels drop dramatically during fasting, which signals your body to start burning fat.
So less insulin equals more fat burning. We talked about that.
Right. Then there's growth hormone. It increases during fasting, which can help with both muscle growth and fat loss.
A double whammy.
Exactly. And then there's norepinephrine. It signals your fat cells to release stored fat into the bloodstream, making it available for energy.
So it's like unlocking your body's fat reserve.
Exactly. And this all leads to a more efficient metabolism, even though some people think fasting slows down your metabolism.
Right, that whole starvation mode myth again.
But research actually shows the opposite. Short-term fasting can boost your metabolism.
So it's actually the opposite of what people think.
Yeah.
Okay, so less calories, hormonal shifts. What's the third reason?
Okay, the third reason is kind of tied to the second one. It's about how lower insulin levels specifically affect fat burning.
Okay. Break that down for me.
So insulin, it's this hormone that helps your body use glucose, which is sugar, for energy.
Right.
But insulin also has this other job. It helps your body store excess energy as fat.
Oh, I see.
So when insulin levels are high, it's harder for your body to tap into its fat stores.
Makes sense.
But when you fast, insulin levels drop, which makes it easier to burn fat.
It's like giving your body permission to finally use its stored energy.
Exactly. So lower insulin, less fat storage, more fat burning.
Okay, that's pretty clear. So it's not just about starving yourself, it's about manipulating your hormones, your metabolism to work in your favor.
Exactly.
All right, now we've talked a lot about the benefits, but what about safety? Because anytime you're making changes to your diet, it's important to consider the potential risks.
Absolutely. And your materials, they do address this. For most people, intermittent fasting is safe. But there are a few groups of people who should definitely avoid it or at least approach it with caution.
Okay, like who?
Well, children, for one. They're still growing and developing, so they need a steady supply of nutrients throughout the day.
Right, their bodies are working overtime.
Exactly. And then people with diabetes.
That's a tricky one, right? Because we were just talking about how IFF can potentially benefit people with diabetes.
Yes, but it can also be risky. Fasting can cause dangerous drops in blood sugar, especially for those on medication. So anyone with diabetes, they need to consult their doctor first.
Absolutely. Professional medical guidance is crucial. And what about pregnant women or breastfeeding women?
Yeah, they should also avoid fasting. They have increased nutritional needs, both for themselves and their baby.
So definitely not the time to experiment with fasting.
Right, and your sources also mention the potential for eating disorders.
That's a serious concern.
It is. For most people, intermittent fasting is fine. But for those who are prone to disordered eating, it can be a trigger.
And how would someone know if APA was becoming an issue for them?
Well, there are some signs to watch out for. Anxiety around food, extreme fatigue, mood swings, changes in your menstrual cycle, trouble sleeping. These could be red flags.
So if you're experiencing any of those things, it's time to stop and seek help.
Absolutely. And speaking of things to watch out for, there are some potential side effects of intermittent fasting.
Like what?
Well, some people experience, things like headaches, dizziness, fatigue, constipation.
Especially in the beginning.
Right. And some might feel irritable or have trouble concentrating, especially when they're first getting used to it.
So like hanger pangs.
Exactly. But these side effects, they're usually not serious, and they tend to go away as your body adjusts.
Okay, so it's normal to feel a little off in the beginning. But if the side effects are severe or they last for a long time, you should stop and talk to your doctor.
Absolutely.
And what about athletes?
The research on athletes and intermittent fasting is mixed. Some studies suggest it might negatively affect performance. Others show potential benefits. It's still being debated.
So it depends on the individual athlete and their specific needs and goals.
Exactly.
And the materials also mention that women might be more sensitive to some of the effects of fasting.
Yes. There's some evidence suggesting that women might experience more hormonal imbalances or menstrual cycle issues. So starting with shorter fasts might be a good idea.
Okay, good to know. So we've covered who should avoid IF, some potential side effects. Now let's talk about how to actually do it, the practical stuff. And let's start with the 16.8 method, since it's, often considered the easiest one to start with.
Sounds good.
So you fast for 16 hours, you eat for 8. But what about choosing that 8-hour eating window?
Well, that's really up to you. You can choose any 8-hour period that fits your schedule and your lifestyle.
So some people might prefer to skip breakfast, others might skip dinner.
Exactly. The key is to find a window that works for you and that you can stick to consistently.
Right. And what about the foods you eat during that window?
That's another area where you have a lot of flexibility. There are no strict food restrictions with intermittent fasting.
But does that mean you can just eat, junk food all the time?
Well, technically you could, but it's definitely not recommended. If you want to get the most out of intermittent fasting, you should focus on healthy whole foods.
So fruits, vegetables, lean protein, whole grains.
Exactly. A balanced diet is still important.
Right. And what about beverages?
You can drink calorie-free beverages throughout the day, even during your fasting window.
So water, tea, coffee.
Yes, but no sugar or cream.
And that helps with staying hydrated and managing hunger.
Exactly. And then, of course, you can eat and drink whatever you want during your 8-hour eating window.
Within reason, of course.
Right.
Now, what about the 24-hour fast? How do you do that one?
Well, as we discussed, you choose 1 or 2 non-consecutive days a week to fast for a full 24 hours. And again, you can choose any 24-hour period that works for you.
So you could fast from dinner to dinner or from breakfast to breakfast,
Exactly.
and you can have water, tea, and coffee during the fast.
Yes, but again, no calories.
And what about the other types of fasting, the 5.2, the
Mm.
warrior diet, those extended fasts?
Well, the basic principles are the same. You restrict your calories for a certain period of time and then eat normally for the rest of the time. But the specific details of each method, those can vary.
Okay, and it's really important to do your research and choose a method that feels right for you, right?
Absolutely.
Now, let's talk about maximizing your results. The research mentions some tips on how to get the most out of intermittent fasting. One of them is exercise.
Yes, exercise can be a great complement to intermittent fasting.
But but can you work out while you're fasting?
You can, and it might actually be beneficial.
Really? How so?
Well, some studies suggest that exercising in a fasted state can increase fat burning.
Interesting.
But it's important to listen to your body and not push yourself too hard.
Right.
And make sure you're getting enough protein after your workout to help your muscles recover.
Good point. And hydration is crucial too, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Especially when you're fasting and exercising.
And you mentioned earlier that there's no one perfect intermittent fasting plan for everyone.
Right. It's all about finding what works for you.